obscene. And I have this in the slide here, just kind of summarizing some of that up. We have three prongs that we use to decide if something is obscene, right? The dominant theme of the work as a whole must appeal to the prurient interest in sex. Prurient means like lustful. There's no value to it in a sense, right? And they use this with not only pornography, but any kind of media that's been put out, right? So if the dominant theme appeals to just the lustful interest in sex, it must be offensive to community standards. And that's what they talked a lot about in the film. You know, how do we define community? This used to be, like they said, they would play it in a court for like a jury of people, and if it offended the like Midwest soccer mom, right, then it was, you know, deemed to be obscene. But when we have the internet, right, because this like was developed in like the 1950s, 1957. With the internet, how do we define community, right? And the standards of what's like normal and obscene are constantly changing. And that's what they were talking about a little bit there. And then it must be without any serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So if something meets these three criteria, it's deemed obscene and it can be banned. So commercials get that all the time. That Skittles commercial that I played for you was banned, right? Because it met this criteria, right? And constantly now, like if something is banned, it almost becomes more popular, like people seek it out in some way. But we still use these three criteria to evaluate anything that's put out into the media. And like they were talking about in the film, things like fisting, which would be inserting your whole hand up into somebody's body, fits the criteria for obscenity, right? And along with some of the other films that they were mentioning as well. Any thoughts from the documentary, or like comments or thoughts or anything related to this? It's a really tricky idea, because what's, you know, obscene to me might not be obscene to you, or what's obscene now might not be obscene 5 years ago or 5 years from now. So this is constantly kind of being reevaluated, but it's a big issue with pornography, because if it meets these criteria, it tends to be banned, and then people owe money, they could go to jail. It's definitely something that's always being evaluated, right? Any thoughts, comments, anything from the film? And all that case was right here in like Burbank area. There's a lot of pornography that is produced in like Burbank and Hollywood and in this vicinity. Is pornography helpful or harmful? It can be both, right? Like most things in psychology, it can be a combination. But there are some positives and negatives to things like pornography. So some positives that I have up here. Some people find it helpful for arousal. It can help people to indulge in fantasies that maybe are unacceptable, or maybe a partner isn't interested in that fantasy, but you can watch it through pornography and kind of get a little bit of an outlet for that. It can help facilitate masturbation, which can help with differing sex drives of partners, right? Sometimes partners will watch pornography together as a way to like get into the mood. So there are definitely some positives to it, but there are a lot of negatives as well. It usually depicts sex very inaccurately, right? The people who are participating and filming these shows have had sex with hundreds and hundreds of partners oftentimes. They don't respond in maybe the typical way that you would see most people would physically respond. They're obviously being filmed, right? Most of them are much like, the men are much, much larger than the average like normal penis size for most men, which can cause all kinds of like stereotypes and myths. There's a lot of violence that happens in pornography, a lot of like, you know, just pushing or like saying like lack of like consent, I could say, that happens. It could lead to low self-esteem or feeling dissatisfied with your partners, or you didn't respond the way that they did, or like our sex doesn't look like that, right? It can definitely cause people to doubt like the normality of their sexuality, right? Because what you're seeing in these films isn't like the typical normal, right? But it leads to a lot of like stereotypes of like the delivery people, the stereotype in these is like, it's like the pizza delivery guy, right? And all sorts of stereotypes that are really perpetuated. I mean, what comes to your mind when you think of like stereotypes of pornography? Do you have any that like pop into your head. Mine's the delivery guy. Like somebody shows up, like, I'm here to fix your pool, right? And then it leads to whatever, right? Does anyone have like stereotypes that pop into your head with pornography? Like, it could be like what's in it or where you buy it or anything like that. Well, you have to, right? Well, it's our last day. Stereotypes of pornography. Yeah.
Secretaries.
Yeah, secretaries, right? I don't think Clinton helped with that stereotype, right? Yeah.
Terrible acting. Fun.
Oh, totally, right? The puns and the acting is usually pretty bad. Yeah. Hmm.
Everyone seems to be obsessed with like incest or getting as
Okay.
close as possible to incest. So it's like
Sure.
stepbrother, such as they like within the family.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah,
Like, it's kind of normalized, I guess. And it's like,
maybe too much.
yeah, it's like sexual.
Mhm.
Strange.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. Yeah.
Because it's like an outlet for people that have like problematic like convincing around them and it comes to
Sure.
like I know there was like people making porn about like rape and then
Yeah.
isn't that problematic and convincing people to be
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like conditioning or normalizing that kind of violence, right? There's gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the documentary. There was a really good documentary that was made about the sexualization of violence in pornography and horror films. So if you watch, I love like horror movies. It's one of my like favorite genres of film. And oftentimes there's a lot of like sex and nudity followed by murder, right? And so like the connection and conditioning that takes place between sexuality and sexual violence and like and all of that is like very real, right? And so it can very much kind of condition that mentality or those thoughts, right? If you think of any like horror movie, especially like the slasher movies, it's like two people have sex and then they die half the time half naked, right? Or like during the act of sex or immediately after. And so that connection that becomes formed between the two is problematic for sure. Anybody else? Anything else related to stereotypes before we move on to the other P of this chapter? Yeah.
I feel like a lot of it just depicts sex being so if it's in a straight relationship, I guess, depicts that it's like over when the guy is finished.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of the times it can be harmful because it's like a stereotype or a myth that about sex, and so people going into sex, I think, can think that that's just what it is.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the video ends.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? And if that is your only like teacher when it comes to sex, and a lot of like young people will watch pornographic films or videos on the internet, and then that's their metric of what sex looks like, that could be really problematic, right? Or lead to like an unsuccessful like sexual like encounter with somebody, for sure. Prostitution, the other P right here, the exchange of sexual services for money. The formal term for somebody who's a prostitute is sex worker, right? That's like the more PC term for anyone who's involved in prostitution or like related activities. This is something that has existed as long as we have like documentation, right? Sometimes it's called the oldest profession because it's been around for so long. Like we have documentation of this for a very, very long time. It's varied with different cultures and different times. And there's no really typical sex worker or somebody who's a prostitute. There's lots of different types, but this is something that has been around for a long, long time. People exchanging like their services for either sex or money or goods or something along those lines. A brothel would be a house in which a group of prostitutes work together. And there was up until I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, brothels were still legal in like one or two small like places, but they're illegal now everywhere. But this is something you see a lot in film and you see a lot throughout history of people selling themselves or selling sexual like favors for money or some kind of like service. lots and lots of different types of prostitutes, a little bit different for men and women, right? So call girls, courtesans, streetwalkers, escorts, bondage and discipline prostitutes, and comfort girls are some of the most common types. A call girl, just like it sounds, this is someone that you would like call up, right? You would call and hire. And traditionally, a call girl might be someone who like works by the hour, and this is like an old term. A courtesan is somebody who like tends to work with the wealthy. If you see Moulin Rouge, right, Nicole Kidman's character is a courtesan. My kids are really into the music there, and they asked me, they're like, "What does she do?" And I'm like, that's a conversation for later. We're like, yeah, we're not explaining it to my 9-year-old, right? I forget what they were watching. Oh, Hocus Pocus. They're all, "What's a virgin?" Right? Like, oh God, here we go, right? Conversations you have to have with your kids like that you don't expect. But a courtesan is somebody who tends to work with like wealthy clientele, specifically. The most common type of female prostitute by far, and the stereotype, is a streetwalker, but somebody who stands on the corner or who would like goes up to a car, soliciting services. Escorts tend to be people who you hire for like almost like a date or for company, which may or may not include sex. It's oftentimes not advertised to include any kind of like sexual interaction, but sometimes they do. Bondage and discipline, which may or may not include sex as well, could be more about like domination and BDSM kind of stuff. And a comfort girl was the name for or a hospitality girl during World War II. This became a common practice. Women who would provide sex to soldiers as a like thank you for going off to war and fighting for their country. So this is like, these are some of the common terms. Again, streetwalkers being the most common, right? The most commonly portrayed and the most common that you would find. For men, some of the same terms, but gigolo is another one. I had to put the like Deuce Bigalow, male gigolo poster up there if you've ever seen that movie. Awful, kind of not the best movie, but a portrayal of somebody hired for services. A gigolo is a man who is hired to have sexual relationships with a woman, and they receive financial support from her, right? So oftentimes it's someone who's like an ongoing relationship with someone receiving financial support and money from them in exchange for sex. A call boy, same as a call girl. A hustler is a male sex worker who provides services to other men. Right? So kind of having a different and specific term for that. And then again, escorts, right? So with both men and women, what you often see is that you can hire somebody as like an escort, like to go out with or like keep you company on like a date or whatnot, which may or may not include sexuality. They typically don't advertise it because it's illegal, but oftentimes it could be something that is included as part of that service. What do you think the most common reason is that people become a sex worker? If you had to guess, like why? What would people, yeah, financial issues, money, right? The most common reason that people pursue this is money, right? Like needing money. I can sell myself for money, like it's a way to earn money, but it comes at a very high cost, right? Because prostitution is illegal, there's no protection for people who are prostitutes or sex workers. So if somebody, physically assaults you or rapes you or, any like list of things that are illegal, that person has no recourse, right? They can't go to the police and say this happened because they were engaging in a crime themselves. So there are a lot of like costs to being a sex worker, not to mention high rates of STIs and STDs, along with violence and again, just no rights. So there's a lot of discussion about like, what can we do to protect people? Because people engage in this, whether it's legal or not, right? It's a very commonly practiced like thing, even though it's illegal. So there's some talk about like, we could make this legal or we could maybe even like decriminalize it. If it were legal, then what that would mean is there would be like a list of registered people who are sex workers. They would have mandatory like testing, and it would be something that was like tracked and completely legal to do. Like you would go somewhere and you could hire somebody and you would know like how many people they'd had sex with, what their STI status is. They would have full legal rights. And so there's a lot of talk about doing that and the revenue that would come from that being like beneficial to the government. It's part of the reason why so many states legalize marijuana, because it brings in a lot of revenue. Decriminalizing it's kind of a weird gray area. If it were decriminalized, you wouldn't get in trouble for practicing it, but there would be no monitoring or protection that comes with it either. So it's almost like we just kind of we just like turn away, like turn an eye to it. So there's some talk about trying to legalize it or maybe even just decriminalize it. But as it stands right now, prostitution is currently illegal in the entire United States, except for 8 rural counties in Nevada. Not where Vegas is, not where like the Strip is, but just outside of Vegas, it is legal, right? And so what you'll often see, and like I don't go to Vegas very commonly anymore. With kids, it's not the most fun place to go. But if you go to Vegas, you'll often see a lot of like escort services and things that are on the Strip. And then what they do is they pick you up and they drive you just outside of the county line. Right. So it's really kind of deceptive in the way that they do it. But if you've been to Vegas, they always have those little like things, the little cards that they're handing out. The guys stand on the corner and they kind of flip them back and forth. Any of you know what you've experienced that? They always try to hand them to me because they think I'm a guy. And so they're always giving them to me. Last time we went to Vegas, I collected like 400 of them. It became like a game at one point. Everywhere we walked, people were handing them to me, and I got tired of saying no. So I was like, here, give them to me. And by the time I came home, I had like 400 of these little cards that were like, call Crystal or like whatever. And like I hid them all throughout my father-in-law's house. I put him in bed, I put him in his shower, I put him in his couches, like for like 6 months. He found prostitution cards in his house. It was like the best thing I've ever done, I swear. He was so mad at me. He's like, next time we go, I'm getting you back. I'm like, let's do it, right? So next time we go, we'll be like both of us hoarding these little cards. But I literally put them all throughout his house. He found one on Thanksgiving. It was like from 3 years ago. I'm that good. I hid it very, very I hid it in his closet in like the pants of one of his pockets, or the pocket of one of his pants. That's what I meant. But this is something that is still, very much like present, especially in Nevada. And it used to be Rhode Island. It was Rhode Island and Nevada, and then Rhode Island voted it out. But there are still 8 rural counties in Nevada where this is still legal, just outside of Vegas, right? One last thing, right? Is this our last slide? Yeah. This is our last slide. We'll be done really early then, I guess, right? Get extra time today to think about prostitution, pornography, and sex trafficking. But one other area that we're seeing a lot of like sex for sale is sex trafficking. And this is frightening. As a parent of 3 girls, it's something that scares me. I don't know how many Taken movies are we up to at this point? Like Liam Neeson chasing down people like for the 14th time. But this is something that is really like growing in popularity and growing in prevalence. And it's kind of frightening. It's the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, fraud, deception, or the abuse of power, of a position of vulnerability, or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation. Right? Long definition to say what happens with this is a lot of people are like taken or kidnapped or like stolen in a sense, or sold into like sex trafficking, where against their will, they're oftentimes drugged or held and engaging in sex acts with other people, often in other countries. A lot of like kidnapping of young girls in our country and then taking them somewhere else, which is again like super frightening. There was a case of this, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 years ago in Simi, right, where a young girl was taken at Target in Simi, and there was suspicion that it was like a sex trafficking ring. And I forget what it was at the time, but it was like they were marking cars. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but they were like marking cars. It was like, if you have something on your car that looks like this, make sure you're like really cautious and careful. You've been marked. But this is like the most common form of modern day slavery. It's a really fast element of like organized crime, right? And again, very like terrifying. It tends to be young women that are taken and sold, oftentimes using like force, drugs, or other methods to control their victims. It can also be selling someone into like a form of debt bondage, almost like an indentured servitude of sorts. So this is something that is like a growing area of like sex for sale, but it's completely, of course, like non-consensual, illegal, and like it is a form of like kidnapping. It's like a massive organized crime ring that is growing and growing and growing. Yeah.
I work in the city center, and recently, here we saw some property bomb. We had to call security, but point is, it was happening recently.
Yeah, here. Yeah. Right. You tend to think of this as being something that happens in other countries and like far away. And sadly, that's not the case. What happens is it happens in places like everyday places, and then you're taken out of the country where like no one can find you. Right. It's frightening. It's pretty terrifying. Right. Again, as a parent of 3 girls, like it's something that my partner stresses about it more than me, but still, like it's something that's scary. Any other like comments or thoughts? Yeah.
I feel like people think that there's no way that it'll happen in public.
Yeah.
Because it's a public place and obviously someone's gonna say something. But I'm gonna tell a little short story, but it's everything's fine. As I'm telling the story, it's fine now.
Okay.
But
Good to know, right?
But like 2 months ago maybe, I was making a little errand at work, just a few stores down, and it was like at the dollar store. And there was a girl in front of me who was like, she worked at a restaurant or whatever, just I could tell she was a server
Sure.
or whatever. And then there was this older guy that kept like talking to her, and she was like she was younger than me. She was probably in high school. She looked really young. Her voice was really high. I mean, she could have been whatever age, but she seems a lot younger. And he was talking to her and like harassing her and asking her like personal things and like wouldn't stop. And I was like no one was doing anything about it. And so I tried to like basically get in between them. And I was like recording the whole conversation because I was like, this is fucking weird. Like, I don't want to. But anyway, and this guy was also really big, so I kind of waited to like do anything. But anyway, long story short, she was walking out of the store, and I was like, okay, thank God, like we got it to where he was still checking out. He ran after her, like left his stuff, ran after her. And I was like, oh my God, no one was doing anything. The guy had to check out, like everyone was seeing this. I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So I go out of the store to try and see like where they went. I saw her go like in between cars or whatever. And then I saw him like walking past her. And by the time I got over there, he was out driving in his car, and I didn't see where she went. She wasn't around, and it was so scary. And I was like, this girl.
Yeah.
And so I ended up like contacting the police. I remembered all the information that I could, and then she said where she worked, which was crazy. But so I ended up calling her work too and being like, hey, this girl, I think she works there. If you have anyone that works there by that name, like this is what she looks like, this is what she sounds, just anything I could remember. And then so they were aware of it too. I was like, in case she wasn't coming to work or something. Long story short, I think everything's okay. The reason why is because I gave multiple police officers in like different branches or whatever my number in case they needed any information, and they did tell me if I didn't hear anything back that it's it's probably fine.
Sure.
I didn't hear anything back from her work or them, so I'm like, okay, I think she's fine, right? Because they would call me back, right? So I think everything's fine. But the whole reason I'm telling the story is just because I feel like it's so important to like say something if you see something.
Sure.
Because it's really uncomfortable when you're in that situation to like say something to anyone, because it's like, what if you're wrong? And what if, you know, you don't want to be like
Yeah.
making a scene out of nothing. But I feel like if it was you in that situation, you would want someone to say something and, and you know, save you from a possible dangerous situation. But it taught me a lot, because even after, like, I was like, I needed to do more. Like, I needed to literally say something or yell to someone, you know what I mean? So I definitely learned from that, but I don't know. It's very important to say something.
That's pretty phenomenal that you did what you did, right? And I'm sure, hopefully she's fine and like completely appreciates that. Yeah.
I don't know, that I let it go that far and that he was running after me.
It's really important to be aware of your surroundings, right? Like, we tend to be kind of in our own bubbles and do our thing, and we're paying attention to what we're doing. But I mean, it's important to be aware of the things around us. And if you see something that like that, I think what you did is admirable. A lot of people would just kind of, you know, go on with their day and look the other way. I think that's fantastic that you did. You might have saved this person's life. Hopefully that's what happened, right? Yeah. Right. Hopefully. I'm going to say yes. I hope so. Right. I mean, I hope so. Give you any information.
Yeah, they, you know, because it's personal, like,
Mhm.
whatever for her safety. But by what they said, they were like, I can't tell you anything about anyone who works here, but we're not worried. I'm like, okay.
Okay, good. I'll take
All
that.
right, yeah, love that.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary. I mean, and that's here. Again, this is here. Like, it's not. Yeah, that's not like anywhere far away. So just being aware of, you know, who's watching you, who's around you, like regardless of your identity or orientation or like sex, gender identity, like it's important to be aware, right? Because you don't know. It's sad to think that the world is a dangerous place, but it can be. It can be. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe people might be afraid to like make a scene.
Yeah.
And like maybe they're wrong. I had this guy like try to call me over to his car once when I was like 16,
Mhm.
and I ran away and I called my mom and the police. And then my mom was crazy and she went down there and yelled at him. And like he got really pissed because he was like, well, I just need directions and blah blah blah. And he was like, I called her over because I thought she was older from the way she was dressed, and like he was like making all these excuses.
Sure.
I felt really bad in the moment because like he could have just been like asking for directions, but my mom was like, he shouldn't have, like, even if he was his intentions were innocent, like he shouldn't have called a young girl over to his car.
Right.
It was parked really far away from the store, so like there was no one around. So like even if his intentions were to kidnap me, like it was an inappropriate behavior, and you shouldn't feel bad ever for like protecting yourself.
Well, yeah, and like the worst thing you can do is like, oh, it's fine, and I'm like, you know, and underplay it. Like, I mean, yeah, maybe you have a situation where you have to apologize to somebody because you overreacted, but if you're safe, I mean, that's probably better than what could have been. And we were talking before class about like a kind of some spillover covering serial killers in my next class, right? Of overlap here, but a lot of like, you know, serial killers and people who attack, like especially young women, have ploys for help. You know, oh, I'm injured, I need help, like will you help me, or I need directions, and then that's their in, you know, to trap you in some way. Like, you hate to be suspicious of people like all the time. It's a sad way to live, but you also want to be safe. It's important to be safe. Yeah.
I work at the studio, so I have minors constantly coming in and like Leos. Those like not covering as much for like younger kids. So I'm so protective of them.
Sure.
I can't, like they're sometimes old women. But I had two men dressed in all black taking pictures through the windows of like 4th grade girls like just a week ago.
Yeah.
And it's everything.
It's scary. I got in trouble for taking, I don't know what that reminded me. My daughter went to a swim class. It's like her first swim class. So I I take pictures of everything. That's just who I am. It was her first swim class, so I was like, I gotta get a picture, and they came up to me, they're like, you can't take pictures here. And I was like, oh, it didn't even occur to me that like it's a bunch of kids in swimsuits. I was just like, well, just my kid in a swim cap looks so cute, but like, taking pictures or profiling people or like watching them, I mean, that can be anywhere. And how scary standing outside of a place like doing that. Yeah, it's not suspicious at all, right? No, yeah. Okay,
One, I absolutely hate how Shannon is sexualized.
yeah.
So easily. Like,
Oh, yeah.
just like with swimsuits, like they're not even like developed yet, they're already sexualized.
Right.
So disgusting. Second, there's going on to like the women who like be like, oh, I'm hurt, I need help.
Yeah.
One time I was at dinner with my mom, brother, and I had to leave earlier for not for and this woman comes up to me and all black and like has a like, initiative. She's like, are you able to like drive me to drop off my bags at my house? Like, you take my bags and take me to my house. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I have to meet somebody right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, she's like, please, I'll give you money, like, please. She's like, or like an Uber or something, like, please just like take me to my house. Like,
Yeah.
it's right around the street. And it was just really terrifying. She kept, like, what she needs to do it.
Right. And I think it's important to pay attention to that, like, that gut feeling that like we get about people. Like I always try and assume that people are good because it's hard to live in any other way, at least for me. But like there are times where like you get that feeling of like, oh, something is off. I think it's really important to pay attention to that. And I agree with you. I hate how we sexualize so much, like, oh, the Halloween costumes, like how hard it was this year. My kids are 9 and 11. And so it was so difficult to find them costumes that weren't like hyper sexualized. Like, even things like one of them wanted to be Stitch, like from Lilo and Stitch. And it was like the most hyper sexualized version of Stitch ever. I'm like, Stitch is like a little like alien. Like, why are we making it like this? Right? We tend to very hyper sexualize young girls, which I don't think helps with some of these things that we're talking about. And obviously not the happiest like topic to end on here, but I do think it's important to be really aware of your surroundings. And I love so many of you talking about intervening or like, having this like protective like intent. I think that's great. Like if we all look out for each other, I think it's a wonderful idea. Yeah.
You never know.
You don't.
I was at work and a rural property on Santa Rosa Road. It's on a busy road, but it's just so rural.
Sure.
And I came up to the office and my ex had left his office door open, the back of our office trailer. And this guy was coming out. And as I see him coming out, some guy comes up behind me.
Yeah.
And they told me that they've run out of gas. And do I have some gas that they could use to get on the way? And I said, okay, let me go, call Rod, see where, help. And then I couldn't find my phone or my wallet. And they looked just like Badger and Skinny Pete. So and Skinny Pete had like disappeared. So I had been like inviting the school district. So I was ready to like beat on someone. And I was just like, I can't get you idiots.
Yeah.
I can't get you any gas because you stole my phone. And I'd like my wallet back too.
Yeah.
And then they played stupid and they're like, oh, I thought I saw them in the car out there. So we got that. And then I called him and he's like, why are you calling me? Why don't you call the police? And I was like, I'm getting to it. They're like, right here. So I called the police and he comes back first and he's like, call the police. You're busted. And I'm like, so Skinny Pete takes off through the field, runs away. And then I just got Bachelor and the police, and they've got some story about that. They go to, some 10-step program together. But what they found what the police found in the car was a woman passed out.
Oh my God.
What
Wow.
was her story? Why did they drug her? What was wrong? So they took her with them.
Wow.
And they're like, we're taking her. Do you want to press charges against him? I'm like, well, I got everything back. I don't have anything to prove. We're getting a gate.
Yeah.
But it's
How scary.
just an average day.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah, I mean, again, like you have to be careful, like anywhere, all everywhere, you know, it's sad to think, but that's wild, right? What a mhm. Yeah. Oh my goodness, how scary, right? And like, I mean, and that's just in this small little class, like here what we've heard, right? I mean, just imagine, you know, if like you asked everyone like how many stories there would be of this, and whether or not it's this or just somebody like with malintent, like it's scary. Be aware of your surroundings, right? Is the I think the takeaway here, right? Be aware of the things that are going on around you. And I think again, it's amazing so many of you being willing to like do something to help somebody else. I think that's fantastic too. Let's stare at each other for the next 27 minutes or whatever, right? I don't want to let you go. I would love to say thank you for this is like when we announced this class and we had so few people, I was like, this is either going to be fantastic or it's going to be weird that we have like 16 people. I feel like this has been just such a nice, like intimate, like little class, which is fantastic for this, right? Most of my other classes are closer to 40, but I've loved this class. I'm sad that it's over. I would love to just stare at you for 27 minutes, but I know I probably would love to have a little bit of extra time. But thank you all for just participating and being just a wonderfully like a group of people. I'm sad. I'm gonna get emotional, so I'm gonna stop right there. But I'll hang out for a little bit if you have any questions or anything. Otherwise, please don't forget about the exam. If you have questions about your grade, come find me or come talk to me or email me, whatever it might be. And I teach lots of other classes here. If you're not tired of me at this point, you can come join me for another class, right? And if not, good luck with your finals. Yeah.
Do we not have class in?
We don't, it's our exam, right? So this is our, yeah. Look, it's, you didn't have the sadness because you didn't know, right? Yeah, today's our last, like, right? I've known all week, so like, I'm a sentimental person, like, if you're not seeing that, like, so, again, I will miss all of you. I'm here though, if you want to come say hi, I always have candy, right? That's all.
Are they gonna keep offering?
Yeah, I teach it again in the spring. Right. You don't want to take it again, but like if you wanted to come back, right? But we'll stop there. If you have any questions or thoughts or anything, I'll hang out for a little bit. Otherwise, good luck with the exam. Good luck with your finals, and thank you again for a wonderful semester. Get out. Oh, you don't have to clap. No. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the jelly bean.
Thank you, everybody.
I better take out my pornography documentary before I get in trouble. What were you watching in there? Bye. I've gotten in trouble for some searches on my computer. Alrighty.
Are you getting your tree taxon?
I'm getting it on the 21st. Yeah. I put on like I didn't like this one. I put on like with that ink box thing that you had told me about. I need to spread the truth out a little bit. I can't figure out like I'm so deep on like symbolism.
Is that like with the solid? Like with the. Not my dad used to it's like a basic.
So I know that.
And he's like, you're not allowed to go.
Oh,
It's like this. It's fine. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
The whole thing.